Hello.
Hi, Atika.
Um,
Am I audible?
yes, you are, but I can. Okay, it's fine now.
Okay, sure.
Uh,
If there's at any point, if there is some issue with the, with my internet, just like let me know.
sure.
Okay.
Hi, Anukriti. I have sent you the request to join as a speaker. Yes, you are. Hi. First of all, welcome both of you to our space today. We will just wait for another 2-3 minutes and let our audience join as well.
Sure. Yes, sure.
I think we can start with our conversation and our audience can join in between as well. Can we begin?
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
Alright. So, hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's space on the role of women in advocacy and social justice movement. I'm Yatika, Communications Officer at Red Dot Foundation, and I will be your host for today. It's a privilege to be joined by two amazing speakers, Aparimita and Anukriti, both of whom will be bringing invaluable perspectives to this discussion. And throughout this discussion, we will explore various dimensions of how women have played important roles in social justice movements, with insights into legal empowerment and the psychological barriers women leaders face. So, I encourage you all to listen closely and please note that we will be taking your questions toward the end of the session. And additionally, a recording of this space will be made available afterward. So feel free to revisit the conversation. First of all, let me introduce you all to our speakers for today. We have Aparimita Pratap. She's an advocate with over 5 years of experience, including work combating sexual and gender based violence as a project officer in the gender and violence team at the Migration and Asylum Project. She conducts legal awareness sessions in migrant communities and trains paralegal volunteers. She works on strengthening the barefoot advocate system in migrant communities in Delhi by regularly engaging with them. She has represented women from marginalized communities in Delhi High Court and district courts in cases of domestic violence, sexual harassment, and rape. Aparimita also engages in policy reform and strategic litigation relevant to survivors of sexual and gender based violence. So, thank you for joining us today, Aparimita.
Thank you so much, Yatika, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on the panel. It'll be a lovely conversation.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. And we have Anukriti Singh. Anukriti Singh is a compassionate psychotherapist dedicated to empowering individuals towards mental well being. She holds an MSc in psychology from the University of Essex and an MA in gender studies from Ambedkar University, Delhi. Specializing in anxiety, depression, body image, and self esteem issues, Anukriti uses a cure affirmative approach to create a safe and inclusive space for all the individuals to explore their thoughts, emotions, and identities. Through empathetic listening and evidence based practices, she supports clients in navigating life's challenges and embracing their authentic selves, employing an electric approach to therapy. So, thank you, Anukriti, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Looking forward this to this conversation.
Likewise. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the fact that Aparimita bringing a legal perspective and Anukriti offering a mental health lens. So, today's conversation definitely promises to be a very rich and multifaceted exploration of women's role in advocacy and social justice. And I'm really, really excited and looking forward to our conversation today. So, with that, let's begin with our event today. Aparimita, when we speak about advocacy, what does it mean to you, and why do you believe women have been so central to social justice movement?
So, Yatika, before I answer this question, I just wanted to set the context of the event for the other listeners in the sense that I wanted to speak a bit about how we conduct the grassroots work so that even when the Q&A happens, people can ask like specific and more relevant questions if they have to the work. So, I work in the gender and violence team at the Migration and Asylum Project, and we work with marginalized communities in Delhi. So our work essentially involves, like you were saying, like creating a barefoot advocate network and providing representation to women in these communities. So the way we do it is like in five ways. First is that we set up like help desks and awareness sessions in the community, and which is basically a legal awareness and capacity building prong of the program. And therein we train female paralegal volunteers, basically train community women to be paralegal volunteers and help other women in their community approach the appropriate support structures. Then the second is we provide them first response assistance, which is if any survivor comes to us after our awareness sessions and tells us that there is something I need help with in terms of going to the police or going to the hospital, we have a panel of paralegal volunteers who basically help them do that. And then we also do legal representation, which is take these cases to court, and for that we have a panel of legal aid lawyers that work with us, and also like advocacy and policy implementation. So from I mean the reason why I was explaining the work we do is because like day in and day out I see women at the very grassroots doing advocacy. So to me advocacy means being a voice for those whose voices often go unheard, and it's basically standing up for people's rights. But what I see be very different in when we see grassroots led campaigns, and how when we talk about barefoot advocate network, you'll have like paralegal volunteers, you'll have your asha workers, anganwadi workers, and community leaders, community spirited women. So when all of them come together, what you see is that women are very, very pivotal to talk when we talk about like social justice movements, and that everything is gendered and every social justice movement has to be looked at from a very intersectional and gendered lens. So when we talk about social justice movement, if we look at movements that are not typically women led movements, such as for example if we talk about like labor rights, the narrative will never be complete if we don't include informal sector workers, we don't include women labor force that has issues which are different to the male labor force. And like advocacy needs to be done differently for them. And then when you look at women's rights movements, even within that, when you see that women can be further marginalized on the basis of like caste, religion, disability, sexuality, and number of factors, and that needs to be taken into account since women also is not a homogeneous group. So all in all, I think I advocacy essentially means like looking at policy issues on a local level as well as a state level and national level, but all from a very very intersectional and gendered lens as well. So yeah.
Mhm. Thank you, Paramita. And it's very powerful, the work you and your team does. And I just want to bring up our Safe City app. So I think it will align to your work as well, and it will reach more people. It will help more people. So what is Safe City app is basically Safe City. It's a platform that crowdsources personal stories of sexual harassment and abuses in public spaces. And this anonymous data, it gets aggregated as hotspots on a map, indicating trends at a local level. And the idea is to make this data useful for individuals, local communities, and local administration to identify the factors that cause behavior that leads to the violence and work on strategies for solutions. So all these anonymous data will get shared with the police, and they administer it, and they take action accordingly in those spaces. So I think it will definitely align with the goal both of us have. And I think it really resonates when we see the movements across the globe as well. And moving on to Anukriti, what does advocacy mean from a mental health perspective, and why do you think women have played such a significant role?
So I think that as Aparmita has already spoken about the meaning of it, like it's about listening to voices which go unheard. Speaking from a psychological perspective, and working as a queer affirmative psychologist counselor, right? So we have our organization Mind Chatter, with where we cater to all the needs, and where we listen to you know pay attention to the individualistic requirements of people, and then accordingly go for the therapy thing. So however, coming back to like Aparmita mentioned, that it is about amplifying the voices that go unheard, right? Also, I would like to add here, in from the psychological perspective, I think that advocacy, it is important to recognize that it's not just about speaking for the people, but also to empower them to speak for themselves. And women, and particularly those from the marginalized community, have this unique empathy and resilience, which often makes them powerful advocates. Like historically speaking, women have been at the forefront of social justice movements because of their experiences with oppression, whether through patriarchal systems or gender based violence or exclusion from decision making, often which motivates them to challenge the structures. right? And if we look into the Savitri Bai Phule case, who fought for the rights of women, and also against the caste-based oppression. I would also like to mention Medha Patkar's activism in the Narmada Bachao Andolan, right, where it was not just about fighting for the display, about displacing women, but also fighting for the dignity and justice for all. And again, from a psychological perspective, I think advocacy and empowerment of any kind also requires some kind of financial empowerment, right? Because that somewhere leads to an overall strengthening of our standpoint. Yeah. So that is like my opinion about it, that it's a very subjective process, and it can lead to like a lot of change.
Yes, Anukriti, I completely agree with you here. And women, like as you mentioned, women play such a central role in the history specifically because they have been both the victims and caregivers in social justice contexts. And their strength lies not only in their resilience, but in the empathy they bring to these movements as well. So, building on our conversation, Aparimita, when we look at legal education and rights awareness, how do you think they empower women, especially at the grassroots level, to prevent and combat violence?
So first of all, like thank you, Yatika, for telling me about the app, and I have been following your work as well for the work of your organization for some time, and I see a lot of synergies in how we can use that in our work as well. Yeah, that's a larger conversation that I'll probably have with you after the event. And I think with respect to legal education and rights awareness, before like I get into how they like empower women, I think it's also very important to talk about how difficult it is to have that conversation in the first place. So when we go in these communities, it's not like we can just go and start talking about legal education and like rights, and that will be received very well, or that there could be an open conversation when we do it, like when we go inside the communities. But how we do it is like we start off a conversation on health, on education. We also have a labor team at our organization that helps with entitlements. So we talk about like government schemes for women, and we basically ease them into the discussions. So we've been going into these communities for quite some time now, and it's only after doing a certain amount of legwork is when we could ease into discussions about gender stereotyping, and then finally about violence and legal like education in that sense. So because obviously it's always a very difficult topic, because there is so much normalization of violence, which is a product of social conditioning and the way like our society is at large, and state inaction. So all of this leads to it being a difficult topic. But what once we did start talking about this a lot more, because the communities had gotten familiarized with us, we saw that there was an increase in reporting of cases. So we did see that more and more women were coming out and talking about their stories of abuse, and trying to seek help and seek like legal and formal and maybe sometimes informal help as well. So, and what we would see is that in these sessions, where one of the very common questions that we would get from the women in the community was that you are telling me about rights, that you're telling me that this is what I can do if some untoward incident happens against me. But in some other situation, I have seen that sometimes police officers don't register FIRs, or they don't take your complaints. So there is nothing else that we can do beyond that. And the moment you tell them the legal remedies or that are available to them when such a thing happens, because filing of complaints and filing of FIRs is a right that is available to everyone. So the moment you tell them what is the remedy beyond it and what are the support structures that you can approach in case something like this is happening to you, I think it just gives them like more hope, and they realize that there is a way around it. And I mean, that also again leads to more women coming out and talking about it and trying to seek help. So I think legal education and rights awareness really plays a really important role in empowering women at the grassroots. And also, like, one part of legal education and rights awareness is also connecting women to support structures. So be it informal structures such as Mahila Panchayats, ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, because they also play a very pivotal role in addressing sexual and gender based violence, because they are women in the community. So they end up creating like a safe space for other survivors to go and essentially, talk in case they are facing these kind of issues. And also like formal structures such as the state legal service authority, your paralegal volunteers, your like other civil society organizations that can basically help you access a formal structure such as police and courts, etc. So I think more than like also knowing about rights, knowing about who they can approach to get that support really makes them feel like they have a space where they can talk about abuse and talk about like remedying it. So
Thank you, Paramita. And your approach towards reaching the women and talking and make them talking about the rights. I mean, just like you mentioned that you first talk about health and then build a conversation with them about their rights. So I feel when women are aware of their rights, they're less likely to tolerate injustice, and especially at the grassroots level, knowledge about laws equips them with tools to actually go and take action. As you mentioned that you can see the number of reports are increasing, so this totally shifts the power dynamics in their favor. So I mean, that is so true. So Anukriti, from a mental health standpoint, can you you know add your thoughts to it as well? Anukriti, your mic is on mute. Am I audible, right?
yes, you're audible.
Anukriti? Um, okay. Okay. So meanwhile she's joining, I think Aparamita and I can continue with the conversation. So I'm really curious about how grassroots led campaigns impact public attitudes and reduce violence against women. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, taking from the earlier conversation that we were having, so grassroots led campaigns are essentially, women from within the community who then lead certain aspects of the campaign. If you talk about like the semi legal formal structure aspects, you have paralegal volunteers who are like women from within the community. Similarly, ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, Mahila Panchayat, Mahila Panchayats are also associated with the DCW, which is the Delhi Commission for Women. So, like all of these actors, when you take into play, like any campaign which is grassroots led, will definitely have more of an impact in the community on multiple fronts. First is that because these campaigns are led by women who are rooted in the community, so the campaign itself is rooted in the community's lived experiences. And these are women who understand the community, understand the issues. So that kind of the kind of personal connection that grassroots led campaigns can have with the women in the community is uh, is quite massive. So I think that really helps in easing women into talking about these difficult subjects, and also like creating a safe space for them to, tomorrow, like if when they have this kind of a network that has already been set up, tomorrow if somebody faces any kind of violence and they do want to understand what remedies they have, even if it's very like informal, they can just go to an ASHA worker or go to a paralegal volunteer and just ask about, and like share their experience and talk about what can be done more. So, in that sense, it creates a safe space. And the second and very important aspect of these grassroots led campaigns is that it sort of it makes the community more self sustaining. So, it makes the campaign more self sustaining. So, for example, we train community women itself to be barefoot advocates and paralegal volunteers. So these women then go on to help other women in the community, creating a ripple effect. So we've in fact seen women who once themselves needed help, they got the help that was required, and they ended up then like training as paralegal volunteers and then becoming community leaders. So then they start advocating for others. So the important aspect essentially is to ensure that it is self-sustaining, so that despite the presence or absence of any NGO in that community, the community leaders and the barefoot advocates themselves can carry on the campaign. So when they work on such campaigns, they just realize that a lot of it is something they themselves can do. Maybe there are obviously things that they might need from other CSOs and NGOs, which can be in terms of resources. So they can go looking for those resources, but just like and it happens a lot in the development sector, that just because an NGO has exited from the community wouldn't mean that the campaign and the work that has been done till now would just cripple down. So in that sense, I think, yeah, these are the two very important factors why like grassroots led campaigns have more of an impact, and leading to like obviously a change in public attitude and reducing or at least addressing violence against women, because they are creating like safe spaces which are like very self-sustaining in nature. So as NGOs, our role can then be more focused on training them and building their capacity instead of just doing the work that they themselves can do. So yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with your points, Paramita. And Anukriti has joined us. Anukriti,
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. Hi, I'm so sorry. There was some glitch in the network.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem. So, can you just explain, like, how does education at the grassroots level empower women to prevent and combat violence while influencing the public attitudes through advocacy campaigns to reduce the violence?
Mm-hmm. So, education is is a core stone, is a cornerstone of empowerment, in my opinion. And when women, especially those from the marginalized or rural backgrounds, are educated, they are not only better equipped to understand their own rights, but as well, they also gain confidence to stand up for themselves, which gives them like it gives them a very strong hold over things. Then programs like the Barefoot College in Rajasthan, which provides women with skills and education, and it goes beyond the traditional literacy, right? By empowering them economically and socially. And I think that this hand in hand goes with the psychological empowerment. Also, like Paramita mentioned, that they have dealt with cases of violence at their organization. Similarly, like As a counselor, I have like handled cases of rape victims, wherein I realized that not just education, like in terms of skill building and uh, you know uh, technical education, what is also required is an awareness of various kinds, because there were complaints like if the victim would further be victimized by their own thoughts and their own psychological barriers, the fear of judgment, where so these are certain educational aspects which really need to be hit upon and talked about, so that it is the person who's a survivor knows that they have the space to speak up and talk about their experiences. And that is something I feel that at a community level, the grassroots movements can really help, because there is a part of there are part of community who are educating the community further, right? So, and also when we talk of violence and combating violence, I have another thing to add on here, that the relationship between education and violence is very complex. For education to thrive and contribute to reducing violence, we must first ensure that safe spaces are available for women and girls. And while grassroots efforts are really vital to this, there is a meaningful change required in the structural reform that addresses systematic issues like gender based violence, inequality, and the access to resources. And I think that only by creating a safe environment and inclusive policies that education effectively can empower individuals and break the cycle of violence.
Um, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, they not only raise awareness but also reduce the stigma around reporting the violence, which is very essential. And when women see other women advocating and seeking justice, it will create a ripple effect and it will build a collective courage. But
Right.
yeah, yes,
So, Yadika, I would also like to add, when we talk of the ripple effect, I think it is also the grassroots level also work. The work is so important, because it's very interesting to note that when I would find someone who's from my community or from my same gender or sex, there is that relatability which gives me more encouragement to take a stand, to be an advocate of a cause.
yes, completely. And definitely, along with this, we have an an number of challenges that comes along the way. Aparmita, what according to you are the challenges grassroots women leaders face when advocating for survivors of violence, especially in seeking legal justice?
Okay, so first of all, I think the points that were raised by Anukriti were really, really important because one of the challenges generally that even though we work in like giving legal awareness and legal assistance, what one of the bigger challenges also that we end up facing with survivors of gender-based violence is that they require psychosocial assistance, and that is something for which there aren't a lot of support structures. So even to, for example, fight a legal battle, or even to like go to the police station, or do the first response assistance, which is going to hospitals for medical legal certificates, like all of these, the thing is that these are not very pleasant experiences for survivors of sexual and gender based violence, and they already have been through a lot. Then the state mechanisms and how they function adds on to it. So, yeah, having psychosocial assistance and support is something that is a big gap, I feel, in a lot of communities. And like, it's really good to know the kind of work that Anukriti is also doing. It's very, very relevant, even when we talk about the legal landscape. I think that is something that goes hand in hand. So thank you so much for that. When we talk about challenges that grassroots women leaders face when trying to seek legal justice, one of the biggest ones is the fact that they are putting their safety online in some ways, because they stay in the same community. When they take such a stand, it is bound to piss off people in the community, and that can, it is very scary and sometimes dangerous for the grassroots workers. And obviously, because talking about violence is a taboo, and therefore they have to be very careful on how they approach these issues. And I remember I was talking to one of the paralegal volunteers, and they were telling how in their community there was a situation wherein a girl who was 14 years old was being married off. Now, if she actively went and intervened herself and called the police and made a hue and cry there and stopped it, she would face big repercussions in the community. So I remember how, like, they had to come up with a creative solution, and she in fact ended up informing paralegal volunteers from communities that were a little far off, who could then come all the way to her community and call the police and intervene. And that actually worked without her having to face repercussions. But yeah, so these are the kind of problems that they face, and for which they have to sort of come up with solutions that also ensure that their safety is not compromised. Then obviously institutional bias is also a very big problem, because anyway, when it comes to talking about sexual and gender based violence, when you go to any institution, for example the police, it's not easy to even get complaints registered and get actions to be taken on it. And I think the women leaders face, by themselves also being women, face a lot more issue in getting things done formally as well. Apart from that, I think a general problem is that there is a lot of lack of coordination between grassroots efforts and formal systems. And I think there's a lot of work that is required to bridge that gap, so that tomorrow, when our women leaders want to directly approach the support systems and approach the formal systems, they are recognized, and they are able to access them without having to go through a civil society organization. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that. But yes, that's also a challenge that they face. That when they themselves access formal systems, the formal systems are not as receptive. So again, there's a need of bringing in a CSO, which is something that eventually needs to be bridged as a gap.
Yes, Aparmita, and like as you mentioned, it's very difficult for the grassroots leaders to uh, navigate the legal system, and survivors face immense societal pressure to remain silent. And these women leaders become the bridges between the survivors and the justice. But if I talk about India, and I feel there is an improvement, but the road is still far from easy. Um, Anukriti, I think when women are facing these issues, they undergo a lot of um, mental pressure. It's really exhausting. So, what can you mention here regarding some psychological barriers that these women leaders face?
So yeah, I would like to start with acknowledging what Aparmita just said about the accessibility to the formal system for the grassroots level leaders, because I think that's very important, because it can be very intimidating, in a stressful situation. The issues around the accessibility, the uh, pathway that is so tough can get a bit stressful and intimidating. Moving on, when we talk of psychological barriers that women leaders face, they can be some of them can be like internalized patriarchy, then social backlash, and self doubt or imposter syndrome. Like internalized gender norms, such as, many leaders may face a lifetime of conditioning that tells them, their voices don't matter. Because we need to understand that often they are the very, they are the very part of the communities that they want to reform, right? So, and the community is often telling them since a long time that, you're stepping out of your quote unquote your place. Okay, it takes immense emotional resilience to overcome these barriers and advocate for others. Then, second is the fear of retaliation that I would like to highlight, especially in the case of domestic violence or sexual assault. The grassroots leaders often face retaliation from the perpetrators or, their families. They might be ostracized, shamed, or even threatened. And to support this statement, I would like to highlight Bhavri Devi's case, which is one of the landmark judgments. And, the Vishaka guidelines came out after that in the 1997. So just, I won't get into the legalities of it, but the psychological trauma and the social stigma, that she might have gone through. And there is that resilience. Bhavri Devi's courage paved the way for stronger protections for, I think her story highlights mental toll on leaders, while also showing that their resilience can drive legal reforms and bring awareness to gender based violence.
Yes, Anukriti, and the fact that they deal with societal shame and internalized guilt and the immense pressure to fix everything, which takes a toll on their mental health, and that is why mental health support is very critical, not just for the survivors but for the advocates themselves. And that's why we are having this conversation today, and that's why I said in the beginning that today we are having a conversation on both from legal perspectives and from the mental health perspective. And it's the conversation we are having right now, it's very 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 rich.
Right, and also there's this thing that, we need to understand that when we talk of leaders of these movements, they don't have their only responsibilities, not just their own self, but they have this entire movement to lead. So, it can get a bit overwhelming also for them at times. So it is required that we talk of their mental health and how we can support that further.
Yes, yes, and how we can break the stigma as well. um and I mean that is so important. So can you both share examples where grassroots women advocacy directly influenced either legal change or psychological healing? Maybe Anukriti, you would like to go first, and then Aparmita.
Sure. So I think that grassroots women's advocates, they have had a profound impact on the psychological healing. Uh, and I think a major role has been played by the legal reforms. They have pushed the policy changes and ensured that, survivors are at the center of these reforms, and they have helped create spaces for collective healing and mental health support. um, and also, like, I would like to add that while, the legal reforms have been very crucial, okay, the movement also shifted conversations. These movements have shifted conversations towards trauma informed care, highlighting the importance of mental health support for survivors. So these are certain things that I would like to highlight in terms of the psychological thing. And also, the more we talk about it, the more the stigma gets over it. Like, in my sessions, there are times, like in the group sessions and all, we often have, one person share their story, and the other person feels that, okay, yes, there is, so I can talk about it. I'm not the only person. So that kind of thing that these grassroots level advocates, women advocates, have really promoted in terms of mental health.
Mm. Thank you, Anukriti. And as you said, that advocates create mental health spaces for the healing programs, and even I have seen that, and it uses traditional practices in combination with legal rights education. And um, Aparmita, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, so when we think about instances of where a grassroots movement has led to some kind of change, I think one of the biggest case laws that we ever think about is something that Anukriti has already mentioned, which is Vishakha versus state of Rajasthan, and how Banwari Devi's case led to creation of Vishakha guidelines and then led to creation of POSH, so which Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. So I won't go into that, but I mean there are several other instances which I think we can highlight and talk about. Like, for example, the Shabano Begum's case of 1985, wherein the Supreme Court held that even divorced Muslim women have a right to maintenance. And because under personal Muslim personal laws, that's not the case. But this case led to Muslim women being able to file for maintenance even after divorce. And frankly, that was a very big legal jurisprudential advancement in women's rights. Similarly, if we look at like other kinds of petitions and how Lakshmi, and this is, I think, a lot of people like know about this case and probably would have watched the movie also. But Lakshmi versus Union of India led to creation of guidelines for regulation of sale of assets, because she herself is a acid attack survivor, and wanted like a creation of guidelines on prohibition of sale of acids, or like regulation of it, and how acid attack survivors can be rehabilitated, which led to creation, in effect, creation of proper guidelines for victim compensation also for survivors of acid attack. Then obviously we also look at the Shaira Bano case, which led to criminalization of triple talaq, which also was a very pivotal moment in the jurisprudence of feminist rights. Um, so yeah, we and in case laws we have multiple of these case laws which we can look at to say that how grassroots led movements can actually lead to creation of some very important like policy reforms. But I mean, I just want to add a small example of something that I saw happen like in front of me when like I was working in the community, and one of the paralegal volunteers who would consistently assist survivors of domestic violence go to the police, she herself realized and recognized that that there was a serious gap in the way domestic violence was addressed in police stations, which was essentially that no matter how grave the offense was, but if it was committed by the husband, there was a kind of a compulsory mediation that women were being put through in Delhi. And she then ended up filing a public interest litigation in the Delhi High Court against these kind of compulsory and forced mediations, especially in cases where grave cognizable offenses have been committed and there is like a threat to life, threat to physical violence. And I mean, that PIL is still pending in court, but we are seeing that the state is acknowledging and seeing how this can be addressed. So yeah, I think it's very important for our grassroots workers to be in in touch with the formal system as well, because when they do recognize the gaps, we see how they are the ones who take those gaps to court and lead to like policy reforms.
Um, yes, Aparamita, and the examples you shared, there is one case that comes to my mind. I forgot the campaign name, but it was led by rural women in India, and it pressured local governments to enact stricter laws around domestic violence. And their hard work, their advocacy directly resulted in the policy reform and, protecting countless women. So it is really great to see the changes and see it's practically implementing uh, in today's scenario, especially.
Right. And
Uh,
I just wanted to just add one small thing to it. I mean, apart from these formal and, big policy reforms, like it can be something as small as I remember in one of the communities, there were no street lights. And like the street lights were not working properly, which led to a lot of incidents of sexual harassment that were happening on that road after sunset. And I remember how the women community leaders got together and basically got them to change the street lights, got the MCD to come and like change the street lights. And that itself was like led to such creation of at least like some kind of safety for women who did have to use that road after sunset. So it can be even like smaller like local reforms like this, which women do get together and often see happen in effect.
Yes, yes, definitely. It's amazing to see. Like as I said, it's amazing to see when uh, legal reforms are actually being implemented by the government. So, yeah. So I would just like to say that thank you both for sharing such thoughtful insights. And it is clear that women's roles in advocacy and social justice go beyond just legal or policy influence. It's about emotional strength, resilience, and the collective power of communities. And I remember today I was talking to Anukriti, and she mentioned that. Hey, Yatika, this topic is very deep, and I feel 1 hour won't be enough to discuss everything about it. And I completely agreed with her. And it's true. There's so much to talk about it. Even if we talk about the challenges, the examples, the strategies to combat the violence, this conversation can go for another few hours. But I'm looking forward to conducting more topics around this uh, theme, and I would love to have both of you to be part of that as well. And before we close this today, Aparamita, would you like to talk about any one key takeaway you have from today's conversation?
Thank you so much, Yatika. First of all, thank you so much for moderating the session and really getting us to talk about such important issues. And like you and Anukriti said, it's not possible to have a conversation about such a deep topic in an hour. And still, I felt like we were able to make a lot of headway into the conversation. So thanks a lot for that. I think a key like takeaway would be from the points that were raised by Anukriti, and that is something to think about in terms of I think when the points she raised about secondary trauma and how it affects grassroots led campaigns and the women leading these campaigns, and the realization that there is a huge gap in addressing this secondary trauma, and probably like seeing how on a policy level this could be addressed.
Thank you, Paramita. Anukriti, what is your one key takeaway from this conversation?
Thank you for having me here, first of all. And I think this was a very enlightening session. Aparmita's told us so many things about the legal aspects of what is being done at the justice side of the story, and how the legal system is helping. One thing that I really want to mention, like the key takeaway would be that yes, I agree there are so many advancements, and there is accessibility to so many things, and yet there is a lack of accessibility at the same time. Okay. And maybe that is because of the people are unaware of their rights, or the social stigma, insufficient implementation, and lack of awareness. Maybe that is what is preventing things from taking a step ahead. But overall, yes, it is so good to know that there are so many laws, but I really feel that there is further awareness and accessibility required, which Paramita mentioned in one of her statements before.
Thank you, Anukriti. And I really want to extend my gratitude to both of you for joining us today. And your perspectives have enriched this conversation and highlighted the ongoing importance of grassroots efforts in transforming both legal systems and societal attitudes. And to our audience as well, thank you for being here with us today. And we really encourage you to continue this conversation by following us on X, that is Twitter, for updates on future events and more discussions like this one. And please don't forget that the recording will be available shortly after. So, anyone who would like to revisit today's session or share it with others, then they can do it. So once again, thank you for being with us, apars, 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 apars,